Are you ready to take control of your well-being and truly reconnect with yourself? In this episode, we dive deep into the world of trauma and its impact on menopause, exploring how unaddressed emotional wounds can amplify those symptoms we all know too well. We talk about how trauma can be passed down through generations and how it's never too late to break free from its hold. Join us as we uncover the powerful journey of releasing past pain, reconnecting with your feminine energy, and finding the courage to embrace transformation. It's time to reclaim your mental health and create a new path forward. Stay tuned to this episode of the Meno Lounge, Hot Flashes and Cool Conversations.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Meno Lounge, Hot Flashes and Cool Conversations. Today, we have Coach Silvia with us. She is a trauma-informed coach, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation with her. Welcome, Silvia.
Thank you for having me today.
Silvia Causo is an anxiety and depression release coach and vital energy activation facilitator. She guides women through the emotional challenges of midlife, including anxiety and depression, which is often worsened by menopause and past trauma. With her trauma-informed coaching and energy work, Silvia helps women release long-held emotional pain and reconnect with themselves. Her clients emerge feeling more confident in their relationships, comfortable in their bodies, and at peace in their lives. They rediscover their feminine energy, reignite their sensuality, and embrace midlife with renewed joy, resilience, and self-worth. Through Silvia's compassionate approach, women feel empowered to step into this new chapter with grace and confidence. I am super excited to welcome you to the Meno Lounge and very excited to hear about this conversation because I don't think a lot of women really understand the impact that trauma has. And I'm excited to dive in with you to learn more about it.
But first, we're going to jump into a Meno moment. And those are just like little everyday Meno moments that happen when we're in menopause, postmenopause, premenopause, just everyday little things. I think mine today is like a little bit of Meno brain. I didn't sleep really well last night because I had two dogs on the bed and my boyfriend he wasn't sleeping. So guess what? None of us were sleeping. And so it takes a little bit, but I've got my tea and I've got drinking some water and I jumped in the shower and I am as fresh as a little daisy today. Marti, how about you? You got a Meno moment going on with you?
Well, I'm going to tell you the temperature wars, the furnace wars, the battle in my house for temperature is back. It's getting cooler at night, but we're having temperature swings. It's still like summertime hot in the afternoons and evenings. And for me, I run hot anyway. And so somebody decided it's time to crank up the furnace at night and leave the windows open downstairs where the thermostat is. So I'm upstairs and it's always hot in our bedroom. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm sweating and I'm like, anger. I mean, it's like anger comes up. I'm like, why is it so hot? And of course, because the family runs around in their shorts and their tank tops. And then they're like, oh, but it's cold in the morning. I'm like, put your clothes on. The furnace. No, no, no. I'm like, I now have a new rule of, I think I don't want it set above 63. And that better be, it better be like cold the next day, which it's not. We're having a late summer. But it's just funny because I know I've spoke about this in earlier podcasts, especially in less so in the summertime, but these furnace wars, I tell you what, I can't get any cooler. I mean, you can put on some clothes. So that's just kind of funny because I'm just like, oh yeah, it's that time of year again.
Yeah, I can very much relate to that as I was doing that a lot last night myself. I'd stick my feet out, put my arm out outside the blankets, and then I'd get cold and I'd put them back in. So it was just definitely a back and forth war. But yeah, it is that time of year, cooler in the mornings and warm in the middle of the day. How about for you, Silvia?
That was a classic. I was actually doing a live on social media on trauma and menopause. Trauma affects menopause. And in the middle of it, I could not remember one of the points that I was going to make. And I was like, okay, what am I doing here? So I actually turned that around. I had to say, this is exactly what healing from trauma is. It's not being getting bothered by things like this and just embrace the change. And I just said, I'm just can't remember. I'm sorry, just blank, a menopausal blank. So let's run with it. So that was fun, But yeah, definitely something that happens very often.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Silvia. And I know we're going to talk about this more, but being at this stage where we're at a place where we can actually give ourselves grace when that happens, and when we, and not come down on ourselves so much or be alarmed or afraid that there's something really wrong when that happens, to just go with it and laugh about it and joke about it, because, you know, it comes back. It's not gone forever. We remember it within the next thought. But I love that, because that happens to me too as well. I just forget, or I'm learning something so intently, and then I forget something like, what is Outlook for? Microsoft Outlook, what the email program is that I've been using my whole life. But thank you so much for sharing that. As we jump on in, Silvia, why don't you share with us, before we begin our conversation, what is trauma?
Quite interesting, because it's like my passion sharing with people, with women, what trauma is, because we all think that trauma is domestic abuse, sexual abuse, war, an accident, the loss of a parent or someone that we love. But really, and trauma is that, absolutely. But trauma also is what didn't happen to us, the absence of something. And that my passion is sharing with people that sometimes, I have many clients that come and sit with me and say, I had a happy childhood, because we always talk about trauma in the childhood. I had a happy childhood. And then very quickly, as we go into the session, they didn't feel loved. They didn't feel heard. They didn't feel understood. They didn't feel that they belonged. Nothing happened to them. They had food, water, shelter. But what they didn't have is the emotional attachment with their parents. That is the part of trauma that I'm passionate to share about. I work with obviously all different traumas, but quite often we just get on with things that weigh so heavily on ourselves, because we dismiss them as not being trauma, but a natural fact. They have a big effect on us. And also trauma is generational as well. It's passed on from grandmother to mother, and so on to daughter, so on and so on. And so we take those traumas with us, and we dismiss them because it didn't happen to me, but it did happen to your mother, to your grandmother, and you genetically, epigenetically, you're carrying that trauma as well with you.
Okay, so that's a really interesting statement that you just said, that generational trauma. So can you give us an example of what you mean by that?
So there is a famous study, and first of all, I have dyslexia, so memory for me is already an issue. And then I'm also in perimenopause, so terrible. But there is a study that's been done, I think, I don't know, 10 years ago, I would say, on rats. They traumatized rats. I think with every time they exposed rats to a cherry blossom tree flower, that would shock them with, I don't know, with electricity. Then they studied, so every time this rat would see the cherry blossom, would just, stop and don't go on in the place in the cage. 7 generations after, litters, litters of 7 generations after, they had the same trauma response when they saw that blossom flower.
I've heard of that. And my question is, sometimes it's stuff that can be passed down verbally from generation to generation to generation. But is there a component where it doesn't even have to be spoken about? It's just hardwired into the, like, almost like into the DNA, where that gets passed down? Something, or maybe not an imprint, but like when we're talking energetically, it's just there, whether or not they mention it at all.
It is there. It is trapped in the body, essentially.
Yeah.
Because we're not flesh and blood. We're more than that.
Yeah.
We know now that we are energy as well. Our cells are energy, space.
Yes.
Energy movement. So energetically, we carry that. This is why I do the coaching, the trauma-informed coaching, and the energetic work, because I know they blend so well together. Because on one level, we release mentally, emotionally through the emotions, but also we need to release at an energetic level.
And the reason I ask about that is because I think back to, I've one of my hobbies is looking back to my ancestry, and what I've been able to find accounts and stories of unspeakable tragedy and just horrible events that even I'm reading this 200 years later that somebody wrote in a journal entry or even a book about it, and or reading in a historical account of where they were at that time. And it brings tears to my eyes to think, to even think of anybody but my own ancestors experiencing that. Now, I wouldn't have known any of that had I not given some thought and done some digging in there, but it gets me to thinking, okay, what from those experiences am I carrying? And when does it end? Does it end with me? And how can it end with me?
Yeah, it ends with you if you decided to be a cycle breaker.
Yes.
And everybody in this line of work, in some ways, are on that path, breaking a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an easy path. It's not an easy decision, but someone needs to do it. And we decided to do it, and we work on ourselves because, not just because we're doing it for us, but also I'm doing it definitely for my daughter, for my son, and everybody else. And I can see benefits that my mother and my sister, they're opening up a little bit more because I'm doing my work.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How did you get into this line of work? I mean, what put you on this?
So I was in my 40s and I already was in perimenopause. I had no idea that I was just feeling all over the place, depression, anxiety, and all this stuff. And at some point, my daughter became ill with anorexia. And obviously, the family was devastated. We didn't know what to do. Eating disorders are really, really hard place, hard fight, really hard. And I did my best. But at some point, I realized that she wasn't moving forward. And somehow there was something inside of me that was saying, you need to do something to do with you. There is something here that's not quite clicking. So I had to stop. Obviously, I was burnt out anyway. I had to stop and really look at myself in the mirror and start to do some work. And I saw that although I didn't want to be, I was doing the same things that my mother did to me, controlling. You do this, or I feel resentful, or I won't speak to you. So that put me in my path for my own emotional healing path. And then I realized that I was feeling better. My daughter started to get better as well. And at the same time, my perimenopausal symptoms were going down. I didn't feel stressed and anxious. Even the situation was terrible because the eating disorder still ongoing in a way. I was able to be in control more of myself and my life and respond to people in a different way around me. Nothing had changed but me.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's very
Yes.
powerful.
And yes, and then from there, I said, okay, this is great. And I was trying to find a new career. And I was looking into coaching, but wasn't quite sure. But then one day, as I was working, there's a woman came to the office, and she burst into tears. I said something to her. She burst into tears, and she said, "Can you please step in the other office with me?" And I said, "Okay, let's go." And we were there an hour, and she was in distress. She said, "In 40 years, I haven't cried because of dad and leaving mom when she was a child and all this. And I don't know what happened. I don't know what you did to me, but for the first time in 40 years, I'm able to cry and release." And at that point, I didn't have anything but the technique that someone used on me. And I was able to use it with this woman. And she said, "You know what? You've done more for me in 1 hour than my psychiatrist did in 3 years." And she was so grateful. So that day when I was driving home, I said, "That's it. I found my calling. I'm just going to go and train tonight." And on the same day, I just signed up for the training. And that was 5 years ago. Never stopped since then.
Wonderful.
That's certainly amazing. I mean, I just love it when we find our passion. And I know Marti and I have experienced that as well. And it's very fulfilling and rewarding. I wanted to go a little bit into menopause and trauma and how once we have recognized or begun to recognize trauma or lack of love and respect in our lives growing up, or the actual physical or mental trauma. Once we recognize that we have had trauma in our life and we're going into menopause, how does that affect our menopause journey?
It is extraordinary, really. The same pathways of the brain, of the nervous system, that are affected in trauma are affected during perimenopause and menopause. It is extraordinary. And we also know that trauma will affect the way our brain will develop. Again, the same parts will not develop normally as they would in a normal person. So when we hit perimenopause and menopause, and then estrogens goes down, then the chain of command gets triggered. If we got trauma, our nervous system doesn't produce the hormones oxytocin as it should. There's the level of estrogen. This is where perimenopause kicks in again. So I got my little notes. I found it extraordinary.
Mhm.
For instance, the amygdala and hippocampus, which are affected by trauma, have many estrogen receptors. And those parts are inhibited. Then there is the hippocampus, pituitary gland, and adrenal gland that are affected in trauma, but also are responsible for hot flashes, lack of sleep, palpitations, and are also the adrenal gland. They are responsible for producing estrogen when estrogen's levels go down during perimenopause. So if this system is affected in trauma and is also affected in perimenopause, it's just like putting fuel on fire. This is why I'm so passionate about women looking at their own trauma, because you can actually do something about how you feel. If only you're courageous enough to go there, though.
Yeah.
Isn't that the key, is being courageous? Because I know that I've worked with women, they're like, I don't want to go there. And these are women that know that there's probably something in their past, or they're aware of it. They're like, well, I don't want to go there. I've already dealt with it with my therapist. I'm done with it. I don't want to go there anymore. And yet you can see that it's still carrying that charge within them. What do you say to women that are like, I don't want to have to go there again, or I've dealt with that 20 years ago with my therapist, or I've moved on. Like you said, I just keep going forward.
Well, that is the challenge, isn't it, really? I mean, the clients that come to me, they want to work.
That's
They
true.
want to work because they had enough. They have to change. They have to do something. Our job is there is a quote, my job, I'm a Leo actually. And I saw this photo one day. My job, your job, Leo, is to awaken the other lions.
Mm.
So my job is to sharpen my message, become passionate enough to be able to awake these people, these women. They don't want to go there, to be brave enough. And this is why I also went into searching for a technique that didn't need necessarily people to speak out. And this is why the energy work is so powerful as well.
Yes.
Because working at the energetic level, they don't have to say anything with the technique that I use. They just lie down. We use music and vibration to shift things. So yeah, how do we awaken the other lions? We just need to speak to them.
Yes.
So, so some of the symptoms that we may be experienced that could be linked to trauma that hasn't been resolved might be something like sudden anger flares. And that's something that happens in menopause quite often. We can just go off the chart like that. But really, when we look at it from the other side of it, realizing that there's maybe unresolved trauma, or there's unresolved, issues that are maybe either happened in our past or still occurring today, these are indicators that there could be more work that we have to do. In our previous conversation, we had talked about old belief systems and how they interact in our menopause journey. It's something that an old belief system can be a trigger. Is that true?
Absolutely. So I just want you to say something that what happens with trauma is something that happened to us in the past, and somehow the brain hasn't time stamped it in the past. And that is again the limbic brain that is in charge of experiences and emotions and memory doesn't work well, and it doesn't work well in perimenopause and menopause again. So what happens as a child, we get shouted at for, I don't know, dropping a glass of water. So my mum comes in and she shouts because she's lost it. She's probably perimenopause anyway herself. And so we happen to us, and because we are very little and we're very vulnerable, we get traumatized, and that trauma, that event doesn't get time stamped in our brain. So every time someone shouts, even if they're shouting at us, that memory, which is an imprinted in our nervous system, gets triggered. Every time we hear a shout, we go back instantly. We don't even realize it, to a 2-year old that's been shouted by mom or dad. So this is how we carry trauma, not because we think about what happened in the past every single time. It just happens unconsciously. So it comes up. So if you in a perimenopause and you go into an argument with your partner, the same pattern comes up. Or someone is shouting at me. I'm a 2-year-old. I can't defend myself. I feel anxious. Or if your pattern was to, fight back, then that would be your response. We have two responses. We either shut down or we fight. Okay. Yeah. So this is how we can improve our perimenopause and menopause symptoms. If we can resolve the trauma that makes us shout or run away, then we can deal with the normal perimenopausal difficulties, hormonal difficulties. And one belief that I was thinking about, Robin, as I was kind of preparing for this conversation, what I see is many people, many women don't want to change. My body's changing. They feel lost. They don't feel themselves. What about if we worked on their belief? Welcome, change is welcome. That we can allow ourselves to change. We can allow ourselves to look different. That will ease so much of the stress and anxiety and depression that we feel anyway. But again, as children, we have a belief, we install a belief that we need to be different, because if we are ourselves, if we are too loud, then parents are going to tell us, stay quiet. So we, as children, we change the way our nature, our instinctive nature.
Right.
So keep ourselves safe.
The opposite is true, where we
Yeah.
want to fit in and we don't want to stand out, like, our young teenagers. Anything that's different gets laughed at, and that could be traumatic.
Yeah.
Embarrassing moments for our young ladies. And that makes a lot of sense. I really liked what you said about adjusting our mindset to be open to accepting new changes, and changes can be good. We don't have to look like the skinny supermodel, of the 20s. We can accept where we are at today and support, encourage, and love, and show ourselves grace in the moments that we're at today. And it doesn't have to be something that we compare ourselves to the past.
Exactly. It's like being criticized is another thing, isn't it? It's another big, trauma for people, being criticized as children. And someone who's in a perimenopause and puts on some weight, they have a fear of being criticized. So if we solve that block again, the childhood block or teenage adulthood, early adulthood, then we can live more at ease with ourselves and with the world around us.
I've also found as well, in my experience, that yes, definitely there's things, well, I get criticized now, and that puts me right back to being 2 years old and I spilled the water and I got yelled at, or there's something other, I'm gaining weight, and then that fear comes up that people are going to look at me differently and there's going to be judgment there. In addition to all of that, there's also so many things that we feel. I always say we're feeling our way through life, that we feel that occurs in our day-to-day life that causes a feeling that our minds immediately get taken back to something in our past that feels the same, even though it may be a completely different, on the surface, totally different event. Our minds feel it's like, oh, I felt that way. And it brings up the time before when we were two that we felt that way, even though it was a completely different event. But that's coming into play, I see as well. And so what we want to do is get to a place where, okay, I can feel that. And our minds don't code that as something that happened or didn't happen back then, but it can be dealt with and feels like almost like, okay, break that connection between that old feeling and what is happening today.
Yes, and also a big part of the healing process with trauma is that trauma is essentially a process of shutting down the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is, we're going into energetic work as well. We shut down the emotions, we block them. Emotions are energy in motion. We shut them down, we lock them energetically in our body. Okay. So the healing process is feeling fully the emotion, recognizing it that was in the past, that now we have grown, we 4 or 5 decades older, and then we can release it. And we don't have to get stuck in that loop.
Yes, and I think so many women are afraid to allow that process to happen because it doesn't always feel good. And but really, it can be as quick as just a few moments or a few minutes of letting that feeling release itself. And that's where those tears come from. That's where that rage comes from. That's where that irrational stuff where something happens and I throw the soup spoon across the kitchen and let that go and say, I find that I feel so much better at once now that I realize that that's what's happening. It's a moment that I'm allowing myself to let that old feeling go. I don't even have to necessarily recognize what it's tied to, but just knowing that that feeling is leaving me for the last time or getting close to the last time, it actually feels better. It's like, okay, I would tell my family, I said, yeah, mama's crying right now. And it's nothing to do with anything going on. I'm just letting some old stuff go. And I don't even have to be necessarily aware of what it is. And I find that the more that happens, the less that it comes up, the less that I'm dealing with it. Because like you said, I'm trying to stuff it down and it's like holes in a dam, like we're trying to plug all these things by keeping it all tamped down. When really, if we allow ourselves the opportunity to let that go, it's going to go. Is that what you find as well?
Absolutely. I mean, the experience that I have and the experience that my clients have, because the sessions that I do with my clients, it can be quite emotional because we need to go to the core. Okay. But every single time the experience is, wow, that was deep, but now I feel liberated.
Yes.
And that's what you want. You just want to liberate yourself from these things that just keep you chained to the past and stuck in the present.
But these are things that, and I agree with you, Marti, 100%, in a way that says once we start identifying what that old belief system is and where it came from and how it shows up and how it gets triggered, and once we can identify that as like, oh, okay, that came from back in my past because of whatever the situation was spilled the water and mom freaked out, and then we can begin to, like Marti said, release that emotion, but then we got to put something in its place in order to help heal it. Put an emotion of maybe peace or calm or maybe a happy moment or a feeling of love or forgiveness, so that when that place gets triggered again, then you're starting to feel the new emotion versus the old emotion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was explained to me, it's like a cavern, like that's filled with water. And when you let that water flow out, something needs to come in and fill that empty space to keep the old stuff from coming back. And so when we release that whatever that negative whatever was, and then fill it with a space of a feeling, of a positive feeling, maybe when we go back, it doesn't go from like pain to joy, but at least a place of neutrality, which then you can build upon. If that makes sense.
I do find though that when I work with clients and there is a deep release, those new emotions come in naturally because the body feels, oh, what do you feel now? well, I feel spacious in my chest. There is
Yeah.
space.
Expansive.
There is,
Yes.
yeah, there is calm. So it will, sometimes it feels actually strange because another thing that trauma does is this trauma bond. We are bonding with the chemical cascade reaction that trauma, initiates in the first place. So sometimes if we felt anxious all our lives, and suddenly we do some deep work and we don't feel that anxious anymore. So, well, this is strange. It's a strange feeling. I feel like I almost feel guilty that I don't feel upset. So again, there is a little bit of rewiring
Yeah.
of the neural pathways that needs to be done there. And this is why anchoring, okay, I'm going to feel safe now. I'm going to put my hand on my chest and I'm going to remember how I felt during that session. And this is safe for me to feel this way.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yes,
And
that's putting a
do you
new
want to,
belief system in there.
and Sylvia, a lot of us have heard that like this, a lot of the unresolved trauma, that unresolved energy, we carry it in our bodies, and then that can get stuck and then turns into disease, turns into illness, turns into pains, turns into that. Do you speak to that? Do you work with your clients through that as well?
I'll just give you this example. I had a client, she's still working with me. We're on session, I don't know, 6. She came to me 6 weeks, housebound, with dizziness, nausea, and social anxiety. Skyrocket. She couldn't look after the children. She could not work. She had 65 blood tests done. In the UK, they on an NHS, are they free? I don't think, but anyway, 65, everything came unconclusive. She didn't know what to do. So we start working very gently with the energetic release first, and then slowly she was able to open up, and we start talking about it. And I don't know, session 6, I think let's say 6 weeks, down the line, she doesn't feel the nausea, she doesn't feel the dizziness anymore. And that was a build up of so many decades of anxiety. Obviously, then we got moments where things are triggered more than others, but carrying the underlying sense of unworthiness, not feeling loved, always feeling like you don't belong somewhere, it does take a toll on your health. Now, I think I said to her, actually, she said to me, because she was asking me the same question, how does trauma goes into illness? And I was giving an example of another friend of hers. She told me before about a friend that she had a heart attack. And I said, well, you could have gone there very easily if you didn't stop now. Quite often I really see clients when I work on energetic release, the clients will go and touch their chest and the left shoulder. I see so many times. And when it's releasing from the heart, the loneliness, the hurt, they physically do it. I can see it, or you can see the neck on the throat where they're not being able to speak the truth. The throat will just throb, or the side of the neck, which obviously is part of the nervous system as well. The nervous system the vagus nerve just goes through here. So, primal sense of safety comes from around the neck. You can see it physically.
That's really interesting because that just circles back to how connected we are physically, emotionally, spiritually, and how everything actually does affect each other. So that's really interesting that you said that. We're going to be talking more about the shifting energy and cleaning energy out in our next podcast. This has been so interesting, Silvia, on so many levels to try and understand, number one, what trauma is, number two, how it shows up, the things that trigger it, and how it interacts closely with our own menopause symptoms, and then how we can recognize where these triggers are coming from, where the trauma is coming from, and then what we can do to start healing those traumatic areas. I just find this very, very fascinating. We are going to be talking more about shifting this energy in our next podcast. Marti, any final thoughts for you?
Sylvia, I believe you have some events coming up later in October. How can women who want to know more reach out and find you?
Of course. So my website is silviacauso.com, and I believe you will be able to put the link below the podcast. And I'm just put a note here because I can't remember the titles. I have on a Sunday morning, I guess will be for the US audience, and evening in the UK. There's a mental health and menopause, and we're going to talk about the trauma and how all intermingles together. And there is another one on sexual pleasure and menopause as well. That's quite interesting. I love that. And there is more about the energy release, the activation side of things.
That's great. I'm looking forward to hearing both of those. This is such an interesting. So everyone, you'll be able to see the links below. And if you like, subscribe and tell your friends about it. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. You'll be able to see our podcasts on YouTube, Amazon, Spotify, and Apple. I think I got them all.
I think so. Very well done.
Very good. Thank you, Silvia, for being on with us. And we are going to continue our conversation, shifting energy from trauma.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for joining us in the Meno Wave Lounge.